The last part we've seen what is a web server. Let's go ahead with the next part, and that is different types of scripting. You can have two types of scripting. One is called as the client-side scripting. The other one is called as the server-side scripting. A client-side scripting is a language that runs on a client browser, and it has a capability of doing a few restricted things within a client browser. The one that is being used heavily across the world is the JavaScript, and it has nothing to do with the Java programming language as such. The JavaScript is not the one that is same as that of the Java programming language. It is a scripting language that is exclusively used within the client side, and the Oracle or the Sun microsystem is not the owner of this particular scripting technology. Now, the client-side scripting allows you to usually build an interactive website. Most of the things that we do with the client side is the validation. Whenever a user submits the input to our application, before it is sent back to our server, usually we validate the content. Now, the forms that you were creating in your labs, most of them, when somebody clicks on the submit button, they are immediately sent to the server side. With the client-side scripting, we can hijack that particular thing. We can process the input that is provided by the user within the client side itself, and if there is any error, we can tell the user to correct them and rectify them, and then only take the proper or the correct input from the user. And that is what is the client-side scripting all about. The other part that you can do at the client side is the small animations that can be done at the client side, and a few tricks like showing, hiding some content as and when it is required, that can be done at the client side. Whereas when it comes to the server side scripting is done on the server, and the server side scripts are not sent at the client side. So whatever that is executed at the server, the output of it is usually sent to the server, and the clients are unaware that any script is actually getting run at the client side. Okay. Then let's look at the general rule that we usually follow. When it comes to the client side scripting, usually whenever it is a lightweight processing that is required is performed at the client side, because we don't expect that all the clients will have all capabilities as that of a server. Whereas when it is required to do a heavy duty processing, as well as when we want to save some data in the database and retrieve it and use it at the later stage, we go for the server side scripting. Now the other part is the static versus dynamic pages. What is a static page? Is a page that is created completely by an author and placed on the server. Whenever a request is made, the page as it is given to the client side. No processing occurs when some request is made. Whereas when it comes to the dynamic pages, the pages are not actually created, they are created on fly. That means when the request comes, the pages are created. One example that you have seen in the last class is when we started displaying the list of the students with their details. Nothing was there, the entire table itself was not there in the page. You created the page on fly when the request is made, and that is what is the dynamic thing. So when it comes to a static page, the page as it is sent without doing any processing. When it comes to the dynamic pages, the page is created on fly and then given to the server. One of the technique that we are using to generate it is the PHP and MySQL. There are other techniques like JSP and ASP.NET and CGI, Perl, and so on and so forth. We will not be bothering about it. Now the next part is what is a web application. An application that runs on the web server is the web applications, and you are already familiar. I don't have to talk too many things about it. We are already familiar what it really means from the Java side, and I'm not going to venture much on it. When it comes to our application, the PHP applications are not as powerful as that of the Java application. When I say as powerful, in terms of their OOPS concept, PHP is lagging behind the object-oriented concept and the kind of dynamism that Java or, for that matter, ASP.NET has. It's really not comparable. It's not possible to compare a PHP with the other one. When it comes to the scripting, PHP is good. Otherwise, the other programming languages are better, like Java, for that matter, has a lot of flexibility, and you can create a lot of things with the Java side. However, it comes with the cost. The cost is almost whenever you try to use the Java-based application, the cost on the server itself is slightly higher. A lot of processing is required. And in terms of both the Java and the ASP.NET, what they do is they don't create the entire page on fly. Instead, they create a class out of that page and then just execute the class. The output is given back to the user. So they load the class and keep it ready. When the request comes, some method in the class is called and then execute it. Whereas that's not the case when it comes to the PHP. Entire page has to be processed and then given back to the user. You might be moving from your JSP side. When you create a JSP page, you put the JSP JavaScript inside it, not the one that I'm talking about, the ordinary Java inside it. And you know very well, finally it's going to be converted into a servlet. And servlet is nothing but a class, and that class gets executed. So when you execute a Java application or a Java web application, we don't talk anything about the HTML or anything. It's just a plain Java. You create a class, you load the class in memory, and then when it is required, or you load an object in the memory, when it is required, you just execute the method in the object and then get the output. The idea is very different from the world of PHP, but we will stick on to the PHP because PHP is still working, and many people as high as 20 million, I think, websites are registered with the PHP. Okay, so they are giving the output in the form of they are processing using PHP. So let's look at the way in which the things work. Now, whenever somebody makes a request whenever a user makes a request for a particular application or a web application for that matter, it goes to the web server. Web server has something called as a CGI. CGI is Common Gateway Interface. Now, this is the interface between a web server and the other programming language or the other resources which are there on the web server. So, whenever if you are building a web server, now the main work of the web server is to receive an input from the user and then send the output back to the user. This is what the web servers are meant for. Web server will not usually process the content. What they do is whenever a request is made, they go to the file system, get the appropriate file, and then just transfer them back to the user. But that will not work in a dynamic scenario. In a dynamic scenario, the page has to be created dynamically. Now, what if the web server is supposed to send a mail or send some information from the other type, like a database or anything? In that case, the web server has to interact with all these different services. Now, how do they interact? There is a common interface that is available within the web server that allows the others, when I say others, the other resources like an email server or a database server or your programming language for that matter to interact with your web server, and that is what is the Common Gateway Interface. This is the kind of interface you are already familiar with the word interface from the software engineering idea. So this is just a common interface that is available at the server, and the others can just interact with this one. Now, the others can be a database server, others can be an email server, other can be a programming language that is running as a separate process within the operating system, and it wants to interact with it. So, when a client makes a request to the resource within the server, what happens here is it comes to the web server, and if the web server decides that the request has to be processed. Some processing is required. Usually it uses CGI to do that thing, and the scripts which are running on the CGI, that is which interacts with the server using CGI are usually called as CGI script. One of the common and one of the well-known script that was there in olden days was the Perl. Now people don't use Perl to that extent because of some restriction, and maybe in the Java class you might have known what is the restriction that was there on the Perl and how the Java has overcome that particular problem. Now let's look at what happens. This script, CGI script, interacts with either a email server or a database server, or it may issue some operating system command. Okay. Now this script acts as an interface between your web server software and the rest of the things which are there on the web server. So when a request is made, the script runs here. It takes a resource, and the output of the script is usually in the form of an HTML, and it is sent back to the server, and the server then sends it back to the client. So this is what usually happens. So when you run the script, or when you write a script for that matter, server-side script, the script itself is not sent at any time to the client. The reason is, whenever the web server interacts with the script, it tells the scripts that execute it and then give me the output in the HTML format. I can only handle HTML or the HTTP request. I cannot handle C or C++ kind of program. So whatever output that you are giving, give it to me in the form of an HTML. The ordinary programs that you have written in your lab had a way in which it can take the input and the way in which it produces the output. The way in which it took the input is from your console or from your keyboard. So whatever you were typing from your keyboard, it took that thing, executed the program, and sent the output to your monitor. This is how your ordinary C program was working. How the CGI script work is, they take the input from the server. So whatever the request that is posted by the user, the server gives it to the script. The script executes and it sends the output back to the user. So there won't be any monitor or there won't be any display on the console. Instead, it takes the input from the server, does the processing, and sends it back to the server again. So this is how it works. And that is what is called as CGI. If you are not very familiar with it, CGI is a common gateway interface. Okay, it's a specification for the interaction between a web server and a CGI program. Okay, CGI program can handle anything. It can interact with the database. It can do a processing. It can call some other resources on your server, and so on and so forth. If you are getting confused with this, when you start developing the application in Java, that is in J2E, you will come to know the real usage of the CGI. Okay, and you will notice that Java can almost do anything. It not only interacts with the web server, it will interact with the other resources, like you can create a bean and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into that territory, but here the things are very simple. The other one is when we try to create the output within a CGI program, the output could be anything that can be passed by the web server, and it could be an XML, it could be a video stream, or it could be anything. But most of the time, CGI scripts usually produce the HTML output and then give it to the server side. Okay. Now let's look at a few differences between scripting versus programming. Now, whenever we write a script, scripts are interpreted line by line. They are not compiled and converted into machine instruction and then executed. The script as it is interpreted, and then the equivalent code is generated. That's one difference. Next one is whenever we write scripts, we don't have a data type there. They are typeless script, whereas when we think of writing a program, using any programming language for that matter, most of them have the data types, and we are supposed to use a data type and make the compiler aware of the type of data that we are using in our programming language, whereas that is not required when it comes to the scripting. Now let's come back to what is PHP. The PHP is a acronym that stands for PHP. So PHP is actually it's a recursive. So PHP colon hypertext preprocessing. The first word itself is PHP and then hypertext preprocessing. Now this is a bit bad acronym, but this is what they have taken it as PHP hypertext preprocessing. What is it all about? It's a widely used open source general purpose scripting language. What's the meaning of saying open source is the source code of PHP is available. If you want to know how the people have created, how the people have written the PHP, the parser itself, you can go through it and you can view that. That is the advantage of using the PHP. So if you really want to know how the PHP actually works, you can open up the source code and you can view that. It's general purpose. That means to say that it can be used in many different scenarios. It is not restricted to one particular application. Nowadays, if you take any programming language for that matter, all of them are general purpose programming language. However, in olden days, we had something called as business application, scientific application, and so on and so forth. So, for example, in the olden days, we had COBOL, which was exclusively meant for business applications. We had Fortran, which was exclusively meant for scientific application. Whereas nowadays, if you take any programming language, the programming language spans across all the different boundaries. So PHP is not an exception in this case. PHP also is a general purpose language. That means to say that you can use it to create a scientific application, you can use it to create a business application, or you can use it to create almost anything. Okay. It is specially meant for developing web application. It is not meant for the other type of application. Even though a lot of efforts has been done to make the PHP slightly different from the web application. However, most of the time we just say PHP as a web application. Now let's look at some of the features of PHP. Now this could be a question usually. Explain the features of PHP. PHP is a server-side scripting language that can be embedded inside an HTML. It gets executed on the server, and the source code of PHP will not be visible on the server side. So at any time, it will not be visible at the browsers. At any time, the PHP code is not sent as it is to the client. PHP code is executed, pulled out from the HTML page, and only the results are shown to the user. It is an interpreted language. That means at one time when the page is passed, the code is getting executed, and there is no pre-compilation. Like in the JSP, you don't compile the page into a servlet and then start executing it. That's the difference between the PHP and the JSP. When you create a JSP page, it's actually getting converted into a Java class, and then it gets executed. So, whereas here it is not the case. The page itself is passed and you get executed. This is a penalty that people have to place, because you know very well when it is a JSP, the advantage of JSP is every now and then you don't have to pass it again and again. If there are 100 requests are coming for PHP page, all the 100 times it will pass. Whereas JSP is not the case. It is passed only once, and a object or a class is created, and that class gets executed every time. So that you don't pay a lot of penalty for passing it again and again in JSP. Whereas that's not the case, but this is a feature of PHP. Then it is used to create a dynamic web pages. It executes entirely on the server, and it does not require any specific browsers or anything, because the output of PHP is plain HTML. So any browser will be able to show that thing. If you have embedded any JavaScript along with it, that JavaScript will also go to the client, and the JavaScripts are not compatible with the different browsers, and then you may have some issues there. The other part of the PHP is it runs almost on all platforms: Windows, Linux, Unix, Mac, or any other for that matter. So it is a platform independent, whereas even ASP.NET runs only on Windows. It cannot run on the Unix or Linux or Mac machine. Whereas the Java that you are studying runs almost on everything. PHP is compatible with all servers like Apache and IIS, whereas if you take the JSP cannot be run on an Internet Information Server. So IIS does not support the JSP or, for that matter, any Java related application. PHP is open source. It means to say that the source code is available and it is free to download. You can go to this site php.net for getting more information on that. Mission crashed again, so I'm not in a position to show you that particular. I kept everything ready and my mission crashed altogether. In any case, I'll come back to that. The other features I include, it is easy to write the application and it runs efficiently on the client side, on the server. The other feature is it has a lot of built-in functionalities. Pre-built functions are available. Yesterday you have seen two or three of them. You know how easy it is to connect to a database and use it. The functions are already there. You just call the function, just pass the parameter. The rest is automatically taken care. You will see more other functions about the string, about the mathematical function, and so on and so forth that are already pre-built into the PHP. The next one is it supports almost all databases, the open source, almost everything, as well as the commercial databases. So you can use PHP with MySQL, which is usually heavily used one. The others are also there. You can use it with the next one is who created it. Okay. Rasmus Rodolph is the person behind it. He is a Danish developer who created it. He was the person behind it. When he created this particular application, it was called as personal homepage. From there, they got that PHP. He gave the name as personal homepage. Later, it was changed to the PHP precursor hypertext. Whereas when he created it, he created an application that was meant for a very different purpose. What he was doing is he was trying to check how many people are logging in, and he wanted to give some details, error details, and all the details to the customer. So he was creating on fly. He was creating a HTML page and then giving it. Mostly it was meant for error reporting and so on and so forth. But later it was developed into a very different thing altogether. So the first build was given in 1995, and this was the original build that was given by the Rodolph. Then later it has been updated in 1993. Zim Swarovski and Andy Gutman. So these two people have not shown their photographs. They changed it to a very great extent, and they gave it as a name as a hypertext preprocessor. So they renamed it as something else. Later, a commercial company, Zen, came into the picture, and it changed the processing engine altogether. And instead of using the old, which was slightly slower, they updated it with the Zen engine. You have a framework called as Zen. We are not using it because it is bit bulky framework. In 2004, the other updates were made to it, and PHP 5 came into picture. If you look at today, it is mostly the variant of this PHP 5 point something. You are going to say the site is php.net. Very simple site, and you notice that the build that they are giving today is 5.5.8. The version 5 is there as of now. If you want, you can directly download that build. and you have the alpha version of 5.6, which is uh, being used up. The release is on 23rd one. This is alpha. It's not in the beta stage itself, so it may be too much to venture into that. You can download the entire PHP from here, the entire concept from here, as well as if you want to get the documentation on the PHP, there is these two places are there. You can go there and get the documentation on PHP. So the full details will be available. This is from the same site which are developing or which are building that PHP. So instead of referring to a book, if you are in confusion, you can anytime go to them and you have the full details of it. If you download this PHP, you will not be able to run it. You need a web server on which you can download it. So when you try to download it, it's going to ask you a lot of things. So you get it in the tar, and you can then read the entire documentation behind it and then start using it. It's not easy as downloading the exe and then clicking next, 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 and it's going to go. It's not easy as that because you have to integrate that PHP module with a web server, so it's going to be slightly a difficult challenge altogether. Now, before I venture into that, let's see who is using it. I've already told you the Facebook is using, Twitter is using, MediaWiki is using it, WordPress is using it, and so on. There are almost 20 million internet domains are there who are using the PHP. What is the advantage? Easy to learn, open source, multi-platform, database support is there, extension, and the community support. That is the other good thing about it. If you are in trouble and if you just go to the internet and search for the trouble, there are 100,000 people are available who can just help you out with it. And in fact, the most of the problem as a beginner, if you're finding it, are already solved and already been documented in different forums. You can directly use it. The bad part of it is it has a very loose syntax, and if you are not very careful, you may end up in a big trouble. The other bad part of it is it does not support the object-oriented programming to that extent. The next one is how I build the PHP application. Now, if you have a server that supports PHP, it's all done. Like you have the exam that is already installed on your desktop of the laptop of your labs. You just create a PHP page and just put it on the a folder that is recognized by your web server. Rest thing is magic. So you don't have to do anything. However, if you don't have that thing, then you will have to go for a web server that supports PHP, download the PHP, and if you are using the MySQL for that matter, you will have to even download it. So, and it's not enough if you just download it. You have to configure your web server, you have to configure your PHP, you have to configure your MySQL to make it work. So it's a lot of effort that you need to do. However, you don't have to worry about it because already people have taken trouble of doing it, and there are already pre-packaged versions are available. One of the pre-packaged version that is used in the lab is the exam, and the X refers here is regardless of the platform. That is the meaning of saying X. X could be anything. It could be Windows, it could be Linux, it could be Mac, it could be anything. So that's packages for anything. Whereas we have one more package that is called as WAMP, and that W there is meant for Windows. So what does the other part means? Apache, MySQL, PHP, or Perl. So TT is both are there, and this is the one that is being installed there. If you go to this apachefriends.org, if you don't remember it, just type that word exam in the Google and then say download exam download, and it will directly take you to the download site, and you can download that full thing. And in fact, if you notice over here, right at the bottom, they are actually showing you that you can download it for the Windows, and this is what it shows. If you have the other version, check the version that you are using, 64-bit or 32-bit. Click on download. There will be an exe file. Just click next, is just magic. It's going to install it for you without any effort. This is for free, whereas the exam server is there are one commercial version and one free version is there. You can think of using it. If you want to develop it in the Macintosh, there is Mac M stand for Mac there. So Mac doing the same thing, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. This is exclusively for Mac. You will not be able to install this package on your Windows machine. So if you have a Mac machine with you can do it. Again, there will be a download option readily available. You can just click on it and then start doing it. Okay, there will be an exe. There will be an installer that is associated with the Mac. You can use it. Now, if you don't have that one, and if you want to take the trouble of installing everything on your own, in that case, first go to the apache.org and then get the Apache web server. The build of the Apache web server, there will be a download. Here, download it, install it. Go to php.net, download it, install this module inside the Apache web server. Then go to the MySQL, and MySQL has the website mysql.org. Go here, download that MySQL, install it, again configure the Apache to interact with it, and then use it. It's going to be a really painful thing, but you can try to do that thing. If you want to do it on your own, this is what you can do it. But if you are just learning, go here and then start downloading it. The rest of them is very simple. The installation is very simple. It will not ask too many questions, except that it's going to say that I'm going to save this thing in a C:\exam folder, and if you want, you can just change the location of the folder of the PHP. That's all question that is asked. No serial key, nothing, because it's an open source, and then you can start using it. Okay. So let's come back to the place. And we know very well that the PHP is one that gets executed on the server, and it creates HTML that is being given to the user. So what happens when you run a PHP? So from your browser, whenever you say that I tell the server that I want you to show me the page hello.php, the request for hello.php goes to the server. Server opens up this particular thing, and you know very well this piece is meant for PHP. So when it gets the extension for a file that ends with .php, it goes to the PHP module and it gives that PHP module this particular file, the hello.php. It will go to its hard disk, read that file, or it will give the location of the file to the PHP module. PHP module will go to this script, convert the HTML, run that script, gets the HTML, and then that output of HTML is sent back to the user, and the user is going to see the result of executing this particular script. Okay, that is what happens. So you create a PHP here. This PHP script itself is not sent to the client side. Instead, it gets executed, and the output of that particular script, whatever it is, will be generated and given to the user. So this is what happens if you have written a script simple as that. HTML inside the body, if you have just written the hello world. When it goes to the client side, how it's going to appear? That script PHP tag, this part will be executed. The output of it, you know very well, is a plain string. It will be placed in the HTML, and that HTML part goes to the server side. Now, when you create a PHP file, you can have that script in many places, and I've already shown you that in the demo, so it is not a new thing. You are intermixing the PHP as well as the HTML. So you jumble up those things and use it. And if you create a complicated program, this is a bad part, because it's going to confuse most of the people if you place both the PHP as well as HTML inside. So if you look at the ASP.NET for that matter, they keep the script on a separate file altogether. It's also possible for us to do it, but the separation is not as good as that of ASP.NET. If you are using ASP.NET, The HTML part remains separate and the C sharp or the VB part completely remains separate. So there is no direct interaction. So if you are a programmer, you have to just open the C sharp file or a VB.NET file and type the code without bothering about the HTML part. Whereas it is not possible with the PHP. If you are a PHP programmer, you will have to know the things which are there in the HTML and then interact with it. Let's look at how we can create a PHP block within an HTML. There are altogether 4 ways in which you can create it. One of them, which you are already seen, is using this tag $PHP and put your PHP here. The other one is a short form, and that is just a question mark and close it with a question mark greater than. This is by default not enabled in the exam server for some reasons. If you want, you can enable it. If you just put that thing directly in an exam server and then execute the script, PHP will not be executed. The reason is it has been disabled. That particular short tag has been disabled. At any time, you can enable it by going to the configuration of the PHP and doing it. I won't tell you how to do it in the beginning. Later, if you really want, I can show you how easy it is to do that thing. Just remove a remark statement from that configuration file, and the rest of the things is automatic. The other way in which you can do it is putting the script tag in the HTML and modifying the language as PHP. Again, this is not going to work 100% in all the servers. The last one is putting the percentage. Again, this is not guaranteed to be working on all the servers. Please refer the server documentation whenever you are using this. Now let's come back to the PHP syntax. PHP, the entire statement has to be terminated with a semicolon. There will be too many such statements that are embedded between the PHP tags. Okay. I don't have to tell you how to use it. This is the short tag that is there. You can try it in your machine, but if it's not working, reconfigure it. Just change one remark statement and it's going to work. There are 3 ways in which you can add a comment to a PHP file. The one is a simple inline. The other one is when you put this number sign, whatever you type after the number sign to the end of the line is considered to be comment. And this is multi-line comment. These are same in that of C programming language. Again, the comments are not executed. So if you put a PHP comment, that comment will not go to the client side. It is immediately stripped out. There will be processing. If you put a HTML comment, it goes to the client side, but it is not shown to the browser. So be very careful with it. Whenever you put a HTML comments, the comments are actually sent to the client side. If you are putting a PHP comment, they won't reach the client side. So if you want to describe something in the PHP, use the PHP comment, not the HTML comment. And I have already told you how to put a comment in the HTML. So let's go to the other part, and that is the simple things. These are all familiar with. You are all familiar with it. So PHP, the variables are starting with the dollar sign. If you are wondering how on earth that they got this dollar sign, it was there with the Perl script. Perl was using dollar for referring to the variable, and they have taken the same idea. The important thing about the PHP, which you are already familiar, PHP, whenever you declare a variable, you don't have to start with end variable name and something. You just create a variable, assign the value. The value will decide what type of variable it is. So the data type is decided by the value that is assigned to the variable. So when you assign a value, if you make a mistake, you may end up in giving a wrong data type or creating a wrong data type altogether. Okay? The good part is you don't have to bother about the int, float, and other things. The general rule, which is same for almost all programming language. Whenever you start a variable must start with a letter or an underscore. It can have digits inside it. You can have spaces in between it. If at all you want to have a space separated string, either use the underscore or use the camel casing. So this style is called as camel casing. You start with a lowercase letter, and when you want to make a transition, you use a uppercase letter. So there is a, there is a in there camel. So this is what they are saying. Camel casing, because that the camel. Okay? So they got the idea from that and they are using it. Usually called as Pascal casing and common this camel casing. Now you may not hear, but when you go to the industry, they will just tell you that use camel casing. We are using camel casing. Then you must be aware of that particular thing. Sometimes they say Pascal casing. So Pascal casing is you just start with the letter, complete letter. Use the underscore if you want to make the separations. Which one are you going to use? It's up to you. I am not going to say that this has to be used, that has to be used. Whoever is paying you, whatever they say, just follow their rules. Okay? Not the one. In the college, I don't know what they were following. If the college had one rule, please follow it. I'm not aware of any such rule. So let's go back to the other one. How do I create a variable? If you notice that company, you assign a string and it's all done. Some you assign a value, it's done. Some things which are not allowed is this one. You can't start with a number sign. You can't start with the dash here. Some of the older versions support that dash as a separator, that is the minus sign as a separator, but my advice, do not, even if it is supporting it, do not use this as even if it is supporting, the older versions are supporting that, do not try to use the minus sign as a, or the dash sign as a separator, instead of using the underscore as a separator, because if you are using that particular information in a expression which involves addition, subtraction, and so on and so forth, it will be confusing to anybody who is reading it, whether are you subtracting it or is it actually a variable, and so on and so forth. Also, the last one is obviously is out, because there is a special symbol which cannot be used. Whenever you are using the variable, sometimes you may tend to use underscore and then start this. Some people have this habit. You start with the underscore and it is not wrong. You can create, remember, this is wrong because you need to have a dollar sign in front of it. You can say dollar sign, start with an underscore and then use a variable. It's perfectly legal to use it. And this one, let's put one more thing. You can use underscore, underscore, and total. This is also legal, but both of them are discouraged from using it. The reason is when you use the underscore, it means to most of the developer that there is a special meaning associated with it. Either this has to this variable is directly associated with the PHP, or there is something that they are supposed to take care of it. Now, whenever a PHP has built-in variables, like you have already seen, the underscore post that you have been using it, PHP's variables start with the underscore. So, if you use the underscore and start using it, you will definitely confuse all the other developers who are going to debug or test your program, whether it was from the PHP or whether you invented that variable. The next one has to be discouraged is when you put that underscore underscore or maybe 3 underscore or 4 underscore, it gets really a difficult challenge for others to understand how many underscores are there. Is it 2 or 3 or 1 or how many were there? Okay. And if it was not proper, they will end up in creating their own variable. Remember, it's not like your other programming language, wherein if the variable is not declared or if it's not proper, it's going to stop and say that the things are bad. If you instead of 2 underscore, if somebody has put the 3 underscore and total, it will create a new variable altogether, and then onwards everything will mess up. So these two are not advisable things. And as usual, the variable you know very well, this is reserved, and it is reserved in almost all programming language. And the reason for it is this refers to the current object, and that is to even in the PHP. It doesn't mean that PHP does not support OOPS concept, but the extent to which it supports is very less. The other one, you are again familiar. If you want to assign a value, use the equal sign. Whenever you are using a variable, the what value you assign to the variable is the data type of it. You are free to typecast it. So suppose if you create a variable called as myvar, and if you assign a value like this, it is assumed to be int, but if you are not very sure that what value you are assigning, you can just say int, this is very well, typecast it, and supply some other variable. So you are saying that typecast the other variable as integer and then assign it. Typecasting is perfectly allowed. You can typecast it. There are built-in data types. We will talk about that data type slightly later. Even though we don't specify data type, there is a data type that automatically implicitly taken up by the PHP. If you want to set a particular data type, you can do it using the set built-in function. Take the variable and say it is integer. Set var as integer, set var as float, set var as string.